Hi everyone, welcome back to This Book Belongs to Pam. Let us talk about all the books that I read in March. It was actually quite a regular reading month for me. I had a little mini slump in the middle, but all is well. So let's do a little bit of the statistics first before we dive into all the books that I read for March. In total, I read 10 books. That is across 3,945 pages and 1.13 hours. But those hours, they don't really count because I'm gonna talk about it later. My top 3 moods for this month are emotional, mysterious, and light-hearted. So not as dark as last month. I went for, softer reads, if you will. The average rating for all the books I read in March is 3.78, which is, I guess, par for the course. That's usually the average is around like 3.5, 3.8. So we're in the averages. And I thought it would be just fun to check out, which day I read the most. And it seems like on March 10th, I read 466 pages. And then I had a lot of days where I didn't read any page at all. With those stats out of the way, let's get into the 10 books that I read in March. There are a couple of books that I'm gonna reserve to the end because there's actually a video that I'm working on, and those books are part of that video. I'm not done with the video, sadly, so later. Let's talk about it later. The first book that I read, we started off really strong. It's 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. So I read this, I don't know why. I remember now. Remember when I did that romance reading vlog? I'm gonna link it below. This was actually one of the books that was supposed to be part of that reading vlog, but the whole just didn't, come in the right time. But now in March, I finally got a hold of it. I was able to borrow it from the library, and I just wanted to just dive into some contemporary romance. And oh my gosh, I did not expect this book to just be so good. So good. I need to calm down and tell you what the book is about. We are following 2 people. It's multiple POVs. Ava is a single mom, and she's a very famous writer of a best-selling kind of like cult classic erotica series called Cursed. Side note, this series is about like a witch and a vampire fantasy romance, and I kind of want to read it. She suffers from chronic migraines ever since she was really young, and it's actually very debilitating for her. There are times when she doesn't get out of bed because her migraines have basically taken over her body, but no one really knows about it except like the super duper closest people in her life, because she just tries so freaking hard to appear normal and kind of, what people's perception of a sassy, chic, erotica writer looks like. Now, the other person in this romance book is Shane Hall. He is, I guess, an enigmatic, mysterious, very recluse, award-winning author of this literary novels that everyone just raves about. No one really sees him in public events. He doesn't do fan signings, nothing. He just writes the book, sends it off to his publisher, and then he just disappears again. But those books are always a hit. He has a very amazing following, and everyone just loves him and his writing. Now, one fine, fateful day, Shane Hall shows up to this literary event in New York, and everyone's shocked because he doesn't show himself at all. And by coincidence, our girl Ava is actually a panelist at that event. So they meet at the event and they throw some very charged remarks at each other, and we find out that they actually have met before, and they were in a very brief but very intense relationship. They were together for 7 Days in June 20 years ago. I'm super into this book. I really love this book. I don't know. It's a second chance romance, yes, but I think it's just a lot more than that. I felt like we really got a good look into Ava as Ava and Shane as Shane. There's not a lot of, it's not really just about them getting back together, but it's more of them relearning their identities after they split up, and just relearning as well how they can be together. Them being together isn't even the biggest part of the book, and I really enjoyed it. I love this because the characters, they're just so witty, and the way that they speak is just always kind of poetic, and it makes sense because they're authors, so they know how to string words that just really hit you right in the gut. And oh my god, I just love this book. This is actually my first 5-star book for 2023. There's this one scene very early on in the book, and if you've read this, if you know, you know, it's the you first scene. Oh my god, just thinking about that scene like gets me all flustered because it's just it's so good. Other than just the romance part, it talks a lot about, you know, being black, because they're both black, and it talks a lot about how being black affects their experience in life as authors, as popular authors, and how, you know, sometimes people expect them to just always talk about the struggles, you know, being political because they're black. It's like they can't really talk about anything else other than that. Talks a lot about chronic pain, chronic migraines, any chronic illnesses, and how it can be very debilitating, and sometimes people don't really understand because maybe it's not an illness that they can see with their eyes, as opposed to, like, say, a broken arm. So it's something that's really heavily tackled because Ava really suffers throughout this book because of her illness, and it really shows how much effort she has to give every single day. It also touches on addiction and violence as a coping mechanism. So there are a couple of trigger warnings, so you should probably check that out before you read it, but I highly recommend it. It's not just like a sappy, smutty, it's not even that smutty. There are scenes, but I wouldn't say it's smutty, I would just say it's very sexy. Like, I feel like there's a distinction between smutty and sexy, and this book is very funny, very sexy, and I love it. I love it. I highly recommend it. Please read it. 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. The next book that I read is, you know, the drill. I read The Goal by Elle Kennedy. This is the final-ish book of the Off-Campus series. Technically, we still have the 5th book, which is The Legacy, but that's more of like an epilogue of sorts. We are following John Tucker, of course, part of the Briar U hockey team, and Sabrina James, who is this seemingly very uptight, very no-nonsense woman who works just so freaking hard to put herself through university and eventually law school. They, of course, in our off-campus formula, they have a one-night stand that was very charged, very sexy, and it turned out to be the best sex of their lives, you know, as usual in the off-campus series. But surprise, Sabrina gets pregnant. So that is sort of the main plot line in this book, and honestly, I'm not my fave. Not my fave. I guess this and The Mistake kind of ties each other as my least favorite book in the off-campus series. I don't know, I feel like Sabrina I like Sabrina, and I like, you know, she's a very complex female character. I feel like she has a lot on her plate, and it really shows how difficult it can be in her position because, you know, she's not well off, she suddenly becomes a mother, and all of the hang-ups that women have when it comes to, you know, when they get unplanned pregnancy. It's very much tackled in the book, which I appreciated. So I really like that part. But Tuck, oh my gosh, Tuck is so boring, so one-dimensional. He's just portrayed as this perfect man, period. Like, he doesn't get angry, he has this emotional range, he's very understanding, he wants to be involved as the father, you know, very perfect man. But I don't know, it feels very, he was just there as this perfect man who was always super understanding of Sabrina. And I guess, I don't know, is that a bad thing to want? I feel like it was just so boring because of that. And also, there's no hockey. Like, I know that this is a romance book, but it's a sports romance. The good thing about those kinds of books is that there's this very competitive, very interesting sport and there's a lot of topics that you could talk about when it comes to sport. You know, ego, wanting to always be better, sacrificing so much to be that, you know, to be at the top of your game. There's so much that you could talk about hockey or any sport in general, and it's just not there. He's a hockey player, period. I mean, I know he doesn't want to go pro like the other boys do, but that doesn't mean that the hockey should just disappear. It's a sports romance. Where's the freaking sport? I like it when there's an intersection between the two, and I think really the first 3 books did a lot better than that. So yeah, that is The Goal. I gave it 3 stars. It was okay. The Goal by Al Kennedy. The next book I read, we're still in the romance train, I guess. It's Addicted to You by Krista and Becca Ritchie. This is this like a dark romance? I actually don't know how to classify it, but it's a very different kind of romance. We have Lily Calloway, who is addicted to sex, while Lauren Hale is addicted to alcohol. They're childhood friends, and they're children of very rich businessy parents, which meant that there were very high expectations placed on them. They decided to actually live together and enter into this fake dating agreement so that they can hide their addictions from their parents and everyone else. However, the more they sink into their addictions and in this toxic, destructive relationship they're in, the more they feel the weight of the consequences of their actions. So that's kind of a very surface level gist of Addicted to You, and I really enjoyed. It's a difficult thing to say about this book because it does talk about a lot of things that are very serious topics. It talks about addiction in so many forms and how that can be very difficult to overcome, very debilitating for people, and how, you know, there's this feeling of isolation when you have an addiction because you have the shame inside you. You don't want to share it even with the people that you love because you feel like they will judge you, or you feel ashamed of yourself. It has a lot of very heavy topics, and I do think that it was tackled in a not in a very good way, but just that there was nuance to it, and you can really see what the characters are going through and why things happen the way they are. There are a couple of things here that felt too convenient for me in terms of like the people they meet and how those people help them or wanted to help them. I thought going into this, it was kind of like just a, you know, smutty book, like the typical romance smutty book. It really wasn't. Like, there were a lot of layers to it. I really enjoyed that, and I can't wait to actually read the entire series. I gave this one 3.75 stars because I do think that some of the characters need a little bit more work, but I do know that there's a series that comes after the Addicted to You series called the Calloway Sisters, and it talks about the other people in this book as well. So there's more to come in the series. And yeah, that is Addicted to You by Krista and Becca Ritchie. Now, going on with the romance train again, I was really in a romance mood in the beginning of the month, I guess. I read The Fine Print by Lauren Asher. I did not like this at all. I did not like this at all. What is this about? We are following 2 people. Zara is a hairdresser in a theme park that I'm forgetting the name now, but I don't remember the name of the theme park. Dreamland? I forget the name of the theme park, but yeah, we are following Zara. She's a hairdresser, but she really embodies this person who loves theme park. She loves thinking about the themes, the different rides, how people can enjoy the entire process. But something happened to her and her ex-boyfriend in the past where she kind of decided to put away that part of herself because she was really hurt by this thing that happened. And then we have Rowan, who is the grandchild, one of the 4, I believe, 3? 4? I forget. But he is one of the grandchild of the founder of the theme park. Basically, after that founder died, he is set to inherit a big part of this theme park and all of the other related businesses. He's known as this very no-nonsense, business-like person who prioritized the bottom line. So he was given this task by his grandfather in order to inherit the business. He had to fulfill this task. I don't know why it took me so long to say that plot, but anyway, so that's the plot. I found it extremely shallow. Honestly, I felt that the characters were super boring, very one-dimensional. It's kind of like Pixar movie, but make it less nuance, less reflective, and then sprinkle in a lot of smut, and you have the fine print. I just really didn't enjoy it. I didn't like the writing at all. It felt very choppy. I don't think I'm gonna read the other books in the series. So there's that. I gave this 2 stars because I did like the theme park setting, and that was the only thing that I liked about it. So yeah. 2 stars, The Fine Print by Lauren Asher. The next book that I read, I actually have a full-on like reading vlog for it. It's The Adventures of Amina Al-SIRAFI. Super beautiful copy, and I did a video unboxing this as well as reading it. My Fairy Loot like series, so I'm gonna link it below. You can check out all of my full thoughts on this. We are following retired middle-aged pirate Amina Al-SIRAFI, and she is now living in isolation deep in the mountainous forest with her daughter and her mother. One day, this rich old woman hires her for a very dangerous mission with a price of 1,000,000 dinars. Amina accepts this because who doesn't want 1,000,000 dinars, right? And she gets back with her old crew, but very soon after she realizes that she may have bit off more than she can chew. So there's a lot of like magic and legends coming to life going on, and I really enjoyed this book. Very different story for me to read. I haven't read like a pirate story. I especially haven't read a book set in 12th century India, and that was very interesting to read, as well as all of the different legends and different folk tales that were, you know, discussed in this book. I really like that. It's apparently a series, and yeah, I guess I just started a new series. I wish it was a standalone. I think it would have been a lot more impactful if it was like a standalone, because the end there wasn't really my favorite ending. Everything leading up to it I really enjoyed, but the ending was just, it was okay. I gave this 4.25 stars because I really had a lot of fun while reading it, even though it was kind of a slow starter for me. But yeah, that is The Adventures of Amina Al-SIRAFI by Shannon Chakraborty. The next 5 books that I read are actually part of a couple of videos that I'm working on that are sadly not done yet. So I'm not gonna talk too much about them because I want to reserve it for that video. I mean, I already talked about these books in that video, but the video is not out yet, so bear with me. I am gonna tell you what the books are about, and like, I guess a very broad stroke of how I felt about each book. So okay, first up we have Legendborn and Bloodmark by Tracy Dion. This is a YA fantasy series whose magic system is very much based on the King Arthur legend. We are following Bree Matthews as she stumbles upon this secret society and she gets tangled up in it while trying to solve the mystery of her mother's death. I binged this book because I was just really interested in the whole King Arthur legend thing, and I wasn't super familiar with it. I know of it, but I don't really know much about it, so it actually took me a while to get into the book because there was just a lot of names, a lot of terminologies, ranks, hierarchies, things that I had to learn. Once I got over that, it was all good, smooth sailing, and I really enjoyed this book. And it's not a duology, there's more to come, and I'm really excited, and I can't wait to read the rest of it because I really loved it. The first book I loved more than the second book because the second book had all of this dream sequences that I wasn't really a big fan of. I know I'm being very vague right now, but I'm gonna talk more about it in that video, okay? So, Legendborn and Bloodmark by Tracy Dion. And then I read We Spread by Ian Reid. And this one is a horror novel that talks a lot about aging and what happens when a person starts to sort of lose pieces of themselves through the process of growing old. So we are following Penny, who is an artist. One day, she has an accident at her home. She lives alone. And this led to her being admitted, or I guess relocated to a care facility for old people. And in there, she sort of discovers that there's something fishy going on, and yeah, that there's more than meets the eye in this facility, and she, I guess, tries to figure out what is going on. But yeah, this one is a bit of a, it's horror, and I can see why. It definitely makes you feel sort of afraid of aging because of all of the things that happen with your memory, with your, mobility, and just, feeling like you can't do the things you love doing that, is a big part of your identity. There's a lot of really interesting conversation that goes around in this book, and I quite enjoyed it. I really enjoyed this one, and it was very thought-provoking, very quick read as well. It has a lot of dialogue. I read it in like 1 or 2 sittings, I think. The next book that I read is A Certain Hunger by Chelsea G. Somers. Now, this one is a wild ride. It's a satirical literary horror novel. We are following food critic Dorothy, who is behind bars for murder. She tells us her entire story from her childhood to her relationships, all leading up to her arrest, and it's crazy. It's intense. There's a lot of talk about food, about gender, about identity. It was a very beautifully written book. It's not a very straightforward book the way it's written, but I don't know, I feel like the words that she used, the metaphors, are very decadent. I really enjoyed this type of, I don't know, excessive, extravagant, decadent storytelling. And yeah, A Certain Hunger, yeah, I do recommend it, but it's kind of gory, so you definitely have to read the trigger warnings if you need to. So yeah, that is A Certain Hunger by Chelsea G. Somers. And lastly, the last book that I read for this month, for March, is Normal People by Sally Rooney. I finally read my first Sally Rooney, and honestly, it was okay. It was okay. So Normal People, if you're not familiar with it, it's a contemporary literary novel about 2 people who seem to be eternally attracted to each other, but something always gets in the way. Something always gets in the way, and they can't just seem to just be together. It's a story about friendship, about attraction, about figuring out your identity, and love, and the many definitions of love. I don't know how to talk about this book. It has a very interesting writing style, wherein, I don't know, I kind of describe it as this like deadpan writing style. Does that make sense? And the way that the dialogues were written, it doesn't use the quotation marks. I don't know, it reminds me of very artsy films. I don't know. I don't really know what to say about this book. It was just okay for me. I get what it was doing, but I don't know if I enjoyed my time reading it. It took me a while to read. It also actually put me in a minor slump. This was the book that I actually started listening to it in audiobook. That's why I had 1.13 hours in my stats. But I DNF'd the audiobook because it just wasn't making sense to me. Like, I was retaining zero information from the audiobook. So I stopped that, restarted it as a physical or like a Kindle read, and that was much better, but it was okay. It was okay. Please don't come for me. It was okay. I'll talk more about it in the video that I'm working on. But yeah, those are all of the books I read in March. It was a good reading month. I was kind of busy with work in March, so I'm happy that I was still able to read as many books that I did. But April, now the month that we're in, is the Magical Readathon month. So I have a lot of books in my TBR, and I need to step up my game if I want to just, do all of the things that I wanted to do with Magical Readathon. I already posted my TBR for that, so I will link that below as well. It's one of my favorite readathons because it's just so expansive, like the world, the lore, everything is just so expansive. So I'm really excited to dive into it because it's my first year of actually doing like the semesters or the equinox. And yeah, thank you so much for being here. I hope you had a good reading month as well, and I will see you in the next video.